What's up guys, Old Sentinel here. Welcome back to another video. In today's video, we're doing another East Coast engine, and it is the Broadway Limited Norfolk and Western NNW Class 1218. This is the glossy museum version of how the way it looks today up in, I think it's Roanoke, Virginia. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so we'll take a look at the model. First, let's do a little history lesson. The NNWA class was a class of two 664 articulated simple type steam locomotives built in the NNW shops in 1943. At least that's when 1218 was built. They were very powerful locomotives. They could produce 114,000 pounds of tractive effort, around 5,000 horsepower, and a top speed of around 75 miles an hour. These locomotives were very powerful, aka, as the name implies, the Eastern Challenger, essentially. Pretty much the rival to the Challenger. These locomotives were very powerful. They were dual service. They were very efficient. And efficient enough to where even some of them were, the later ones, were equipped with roller bearing rods. So not only was this a roller bearing engine, but it also had roller bearing rods on the driving wheels. And, roller bearing rods on the driving wheels, but you get the point. So, all roller bearing engines. So, the later ones roll very, very free. 1218 was not one of those that was converted. This still has the standard brass bushing type rods. The Class A's had Baker valve gear, and like I said again, these were simple articulates, so they weren't like the Y6Bs or some of the other articulates that were Malley type. This is basically like the Challenger, a little bit stronger, a bit shorter in length, and a little bit lighter. But we'll take a look at this in comparison to a Challenger in a little bit later. So some more history about this engine. 1218 itself was built on June 2nd, 1943, and was retired in 1959, and remained retired all the way up to 1985 until it was restored to pull some freight trains and some passenger trains. Mostly passenger trains, of course, because excursions and excursion locomotive. The locomotive ran for 4 years locomotive ran for about 4 to 5 years, all the way up till 1991, and was retired after needing a restoration. Norfolk Southern didn't want to pay for the cost for the restoration, so they ended up retiring the locomotive and donating it, and giving it a cosmetic restoration and donating it to VMT. So it was returned back to VMT after its cosmetic restoration at I forget what the crossing place name is, basically where it was cosmetically restored. But it was something crossing. If you know what it is, just comment on the video. But yeah, so after it was cosmetically restored, NS donated it back to VMT, and that's where it's been ever since. So yeah. So I don't think we've seen the last of 1218 yet. It will need a lot of work, kind of like the Challenger, and the Challenger is getting a second chance of life, thankfully. But yeah, we'll probably see this running again. I didn't think the Challenger would ever run again after UP retired it, but you could think I am glad I was wrong. But anyways, we're gonna get the tender out the way, fingerprints, and look at some details. So on the front of the locomotive, you have your pilot, which is of course like the J class, where it's glossy and closed. It has a swing out coupler, which can be a bit difficult to get out at sometimes. Let's see if I can coax it out. There we go. So yeah, there's your swing out coupler. I have to send this locomotive back to Broadway to get the smoke box repaired, because that's another thing. This engine is not die cast. This engine is plastic, and it is actually it's very light. I mean it's about the weight of a Bachmann locomotive for an articulated. Of course, it pulls better since it has a bigger motor and traction tires, and obviously a bigger locomotive. But the problem with that is, even though it does pull well, because it's plastic and it doesn't have a very heavy weight, a very high weight, sometimes it will tend to like pop a wheelie a little bit, and derail the pilot truck a little bit. The pilot truck doesn't really have a whole lot of weight on it, or the front engine doesn't. Again, light engine, but yeah, so it does pull, no doubt about it. We will pull a pretty decent sized train today with it, but yeah, it is pretty light, so that's just something to be aware of. Um, Going on to with the details. Um, oh, and continuing on with the plastic boiler. Don't leave this locomotive idling with the smoker unit. They do have a tendency to melt if you leave it idling, because I think that the smokestack is metal, but the boiler is plastic. I don't think that's the case, but it feels metal to me. But I don't think that that's metal. But either way, don't leave this idling with the smoke on. Yours would come with a front coupler in the box if you wanted to swap it out, which I would, and I probably will at a later date. It's just not right now. Continuing on, we have the grab irons going up to the headlight. We have the little footboard up here, just in front of the smoke box door. The Class A's have a kind of like a weird like boiler shape. It's not round like most articulateds, but this one's kind of like I don't really know what to call that. It's like a circle, but then they cut the bottom part of the circle off with a pair of scissors or something. But anyways, we have the headlight. We have 1218 on both sides of the headlight. It's a warm white LED on the headlight. 1218 in the number plate. We have the marker lights right here. These are dummies. These are just hard plastic. We have a curved grab iron going over here. You can probably see the feed water heater just on the top of the smoke box. Going on, we have the walkways as well. If I move the engine this way, and we move the camera this way, and shine some more, and you probably get some more light. It's kind of hard to see since it's glossy and the black kind of saturates and absorbs everything. But I'll try to point out what I can. Yeah, but right here is a check valve that pumps water into the boiler. We have an articulation point right there. You see the articulation of the pipes right here. There's a couple of cut lever here, which I forgot to point out, and that does move. It does push itself back down. We have the Class A builder's plate, the Class A logo on the cylinders. We have the start of the alligator crosshead on the Baker valve gear. We have another articulation pipe right here. You can start to see the top of the smokestack right there. It's part of the throttle casing right here. You see the start of the sand dome right here. Continuing on, you see more of the boiler bands in the walkway, which has see-through holes on the walkway. I don't think that they're etched, but they are a little fragile, but it's not like an Athens fragile. So, despite it being a little bit, it's not as it's a little fragile, a little bit, not by much. But it's nowhere close to how flimsy an Athens steam engine is. That's fact. We have the air compressor right here. We have another air tank right here. We have another pair of cylinders right here. The rear cylinders do not have the A-class plaque on them. Again, Baker's valve gear, alligator style crosshead, spoke drivers, another air tank right here, part of the reverse gear right there. It's over here. More of the valve gear there. Going on, we start to see the very plain panel-like firebox. Some of the boiler bands and washout and clean out plugs, firebox plugs, and all that stuff. A pipe running down to an air tank right here. Again, the Class A's, the N&W engines were pretty bland with the detail around the firebox. We see the trailing truck, which is pretty nice. We see the cold water pump right here. You see 1218 on the side of the cab. The windows do open. They're kind of hard to open, but they do open. Like I said, hard to open. I'm not going to force it, but it does open. Coming to the back of the locomotive, which is probably pretty hard to see with the glossy glare and such. But we have a drawbar, which is a standard drawbar, nothing new. It's kind of like the Bachmann EM1. We have a deck plate with the actual tread. We have a pretty detailed cab interior. Most of the details are just painted black, but it is pretty detailed. There is a firebox clear insert in this cab, and on the QSI version of this model, that actually was lit. On the Broadway model, for some reason, they don't light that. However, if you ever took the Broadway decoder out and put something better in there, which is what you should do with all Broadway limited engines, if you take that out and if you do a little bit of wiring in this boiler, you can light that firebox and you'll have a flickering firebox light right in the firebox door. So that is pretty cool that they actually didn't change that. Wish they would have just put that on the model like they did on the Reading T1, but you know, beggars can't be choosers. Now we're going to turn the locomotive around and look at some more details from the cab. So from the back of the cab, we get to see some more details. We got another handrail on the side of the cab. It's the same in the same spot on the other side as well. I forgot to point that out. We got the drawbar again. We have the injector right here, the blowdown pipe. We have the piping right here running alongside of and underneath the boiler. And the firebox, again, pretty boring firebox because it's just panels and no stable detailing because it's all covered up by those panels. Spoke drivers, more Baker valve gear. You can see that valve gear assembly as well. The rear engine pivots, of course, because, you know, not brass and needs to go around sharp curves for some weird reason. Reverse gear assembly, piping here, air tank, air compressor, more piping, and of course more articulation points. You can also get to see, if we zoom out, probably not visible because it's all black, but there's a throttle linkage right here that is separately applied. Metal handrails, plastic handrails. Wow, that is an Athearn quality thing. That is surprising. Normally these would be metal, but they're plastic for some reason, which is out of the standard for a steam locomotive at least. But I mean, at least they look good and at least they're pretty durable, unlike the Athearn handrails. Again, Athearn didn't make a Class A, but that's just an Athearn comparison because I have an Athearn Challenger and it's not bad, but for $600 it's very flimsy, and it just doesn't feel like what a $600 model it should be. That, and it also has some inaccuracies on the tender, or at least the tender is inaccurate in a couple ways. Again, smokestack, feed water heater, sand dome. I don't know what this part is. Right here is the turret casing behind the smokestack. There we go. Turret casing behind the smokestack, sand dome. I don't know what that is. Steam dome, safety pop-up valves. You have the hooter whistle on the side of the steam dome. You have the other sand dome. You have a low water indicator right there. You have a brass bell. You have a dynamo. I don't know what that part is. I think that's another dynamo. And you have the turret casing. The roof hatches do open. They're very stiff, but they do open. And yeah, so that's the locomotive. I hope you enjoyed that part. Now we're going to take a look at the tender. Now, something I'm going to point out in the Class 8's tender and why I think Broadway should redo the Class 8's boiler, at least, and to make it die-cast. And the reason I say that is because this is the tender, and as we all know, the Y6Bs and the Class A's have the same tender. And the Y6Bs are die-cast, and so is the tender. Now, on some of the Class A's, they use the same tender from the Y6Bs, and they have a die-cast tender shell. So, why don't you just make the entire thing die-cast and not just cheap out and make only the tender die-cast? You know, that's just me. In this case, this is a plastic tender. This is plastic. It has a nice coal load though, but this is a plastic body and die-cast frame, of course. You have the annoying 8-pin plug. You have the drawbar buffer and drawbar pin down here. You have the steps on each side, handrails on either side of the tender, a coal load that looks very realistic, Norfolk and Western lettering crisply done, a glossy paint job, of course. We have a KD coupler on the back. We have an air hose. We have a steam hose and 2 more air hoses right here. We have a separately applied ladder. We have a reverse light. We have some legible signage on the back of the tender. Going up here, we have a water hatch, rivet detailing, a doghouse, and 2 toolboxes on the side. Unlike the Y6B, there is no guy inside of the doghouse, unfortunately. So you won't see Joey in the doghouse on this engine, unfortunately. So that's that. Oh, and of course you have 6 wheels under the 6 axles under the tender, because it's a 6-axle tender. Brake detailing and dual speakers in the tender. It's a Paragon 3 sound system in this locomotive, as we already know. Underside of the locomotive, nothing really special, you know. Underneath the engineer's side, there is a switch for the smoke unit, so that's where it is. It's under the engineer's side of the cab. So yeah, that's that. But yeah, that's the details on the Class A. And now to go do the most annoying thing of all time with a steam engine is to connect it back to the tender and then to go run it. So yeah, I will be back. We'll also when we do run it, we'll compare the lengths of this to a Challenger. So we'll be back a little bit later. Okay, so now we have the Proud A class sitting here. So as I was saying, compared to a Challenger, they're about the same in length. Of course, the Challenger is, well, bigger, obviously. Not in terms of length, but not by much. But in terms of just in general, the Challenger is bigger. This is a Broadway Challenger right here, which will be our next review. My Athearn one is sitting back there, which we might be able to zoom in. Probably see it. There's 3985 sitting back there. That's my Athearn Challenger. So, but this is the Broadway one. The Paragon 3 motor control on that went out on that, but we'll resolve that at a later date. But now here's the Class A, aka the Proud A class. But yeah, we'll go ahead and start it up. Now we're not gonna run the smoke today. One, it's like 8 o'clock in the morning. 2, I don't really feel like running it because it chokes you out. That, and also because this is a plastic engine, I don't want to take any chances. As we all know with Broadway Limited, they have some problems in some cases. Model itself is fine. It's just a smoke unit. I don't trust it because I've already had to send this engine back to Broadway because of the smoke unit warping the boiler because it got too hot. But yeah. But anyways, we'll go ahead and start it up so that you can hear the air compressor going. And turn the headlight on. So there's the headlight. Looks pretty good. You can see the graphite front on the smoke box, but of course the black smoke box. The Baker valve gear looks good. Cab is pretty good. Rear light's pretty good as well. And yeah, so that's that. Nothing really too special. I mean, it's a Class A. Nothing really striking too much. But yeah, so here's the bell. That's a little bit sped up on mine because I ended up increasing the bell ring rate. Here's the whistle. And that would be CV224 to a value of 2. The default whistle sounds a bit different. Let's see, what else do we have here? Coupler, air pumps, you know, the usual stuff, the generic stuff. So, you know, of course, with it being a Broadway Limited, it's kind of generic, but, I mean, it runs good, of course. The sound set's not too bad, but again, it could always be better. So yeah, that's the A class, pretty much. I'll get some footage of it running, but that's really about it, to be honest. Nothing really too special on it. It's a cool engine. But yeah, I'm gonna get a train behind it, and we're gonna run it for a little bit. Do a couple passes, and then I guess we'll end the video there. But yeah, that's the Class A. I'm gonna do a couple passes on this layout, and I'll try to get some footage of it on our club layout. So yeah, we'll see what happens. So yeah, same with the Challenger. If I can get the decoder repaired for that in time, I'll film the review for that engine as well and get footage and the running footage of the Challenger will solely be at the club layout. So we'll see what happens there. Yeah, for the Class A, you'll see some footage I took on my phone for running. But I hope you guys enjoy it. So we'll see how it goes. But yeah, so thanks for watching the Class A review, and wish me luck with the Challenger's restoration. So yeah, thanks for watching. Alright, so we got a train behind it, and yeah, let's go run the A.